All right, welcome back for another deep dive, ready to tackle today's current affairs. Especially for all you UPSC aspirants out there, you know it's all about staying consistent. We're here to help. Remember what we covered yesterday. Well, today we're adding even more to that. Get ready for India's growing naval power, hyperspectral imaging, and even the global challenge of depopulation. Oh, and don't forget, we've got our rapid fire round coming up with a whole bunch more you won't want to miss.
Lots to cover today, but I think it's all going to be super relevant, especially for your UPSC prep.
Okay, so let's jump right into a development that's making waves. Literally, India just seriously boosted its naval power. We're talking 3 state-of-the-art warships. A destroyer, a frigate, and the submarine. The coolest part, all built right here in India.
You got it. The INS Surat, that's the guided missile destroyer, the INS Nilgiri, a stealth frigate, and the INS Vakshir, which is a Scorpene-class submarine. These ships represent years of work culminating in the P-15B, P-17A, and P-75 projects.
It's pretty amazing to see India transitioning from just buying ships to building its own navy, especially with the Make in India initiative. What does the building of the INS Vakshir at Mazagon Dock Limited tell us about how Make in India is actually working?
It's a perfect example of how Make in India is actually producing results. Think about it. To build a submarine like the Vakshir, you need some serious technological know-how. The fact that India did it themselves shows how much Indian shipyards have grown. It also signals this big shift towards self-reliance. When it comes to defense, we don't have to rely on others as much anymore.
So it's not just about having a bigger navy. It's about growing the shipbuilding industry here and achieving strategic autonomy, right?
Absolutely. And this fits perfectly with the Indian Navy's Maritime Capability Perspective Plan, their goal, a 200-ship Navy by 2027. The plan isn't just about numbers, though. It's about having high-quality, technologically advanced warships, all while promoting Indian designs and production.
We've got this big, ambitious plan, and we're seeing it come to life. What does this all mean for India strategically, both in the region and globally?
Well, let's consider India's location. Huge coastline, important trade routes to protect, and a growing presence in the Indian Ocean. A strong navy built in India is essential for securing our waters, deterring threats, and keeping that commerce flowing. And that's where the Indian Naval Indigenization Plan, the IMP, comes in. It encourages more and more Indian companies to get involved, even the small and medium-sized ones.
Seems like a win-win to me. Stronger defense and a boost to the economy, more jobs, industrial development, right?
Exactly. And it all ties into India's Sagar policy, which stands for security and growth for all in the region. It's all about positioning India as a security provider in the Indian Ocean. This even links to things like port-led development with new projects like the Vadhavan port. It's going to be a major shipping hub, a great example of this policy in action.
Makes you wonder how all this naval development changes India's position on the world stage, doesn't it? But let's switch gears for a minute to another area where India is making some serious progress: space technology. I'm talking about India's first private satellite constellation, Firefly, launched by Pixel.
Now, this is a big deal. 3 small satellites launched on a SpaceX Falcon 9, now orbiting Earth, ready to change how we see our planet. They're using something called hyperspectral imaging.
Hyperspectral imaging. Yeah, it sounds a bit complicated. Can you break that down for us?
Think of it like this. It's color vision, but way more powerful. Instead of just seeing those basic colors, red, green, and blue, hyperspectral imaging can analyze a huge range of light, capturing hundreds of colors. What does that mean? We get super detailed information about what we're looking at.
Interesting, but what can we actually do with all this data? Give me some real-world examples.
The possibilities are huge. Take agriculture, for example. Hyperspectral imaging can tell the difference between types of crops, even see how healthy they are, if there are pests or not enough nutrients, all from space. It can even track pollution in water, find mineral deposits underground, and even check how strong buildings and infrastructure are.
So we're talking about a technology that could completely change how we do things in a ton of sectors: agriculture, environment, resource management, even city planning.
Exactly. And having a dedicated constellation of satellites like Firefly, which is similar to the Starlink you may have heard of, it means we're getting constant, reliable data. This opens up so many possibilities for research, analysis, and decision-making.
That's incredible. You mentioned Firefly being a satellite constellation. What exactly does that mean? How is that different from just launching one satellite?
A satellite constellation is like a team of satellites, all working together. Think of them as specialists, each with its own tools and skills, providing constant coverage and a wider range of data than just one satellite ever could. Now, These satellites, they orbit the Earth in different ways. You've got GEO satellites, they're geostationary, meaning they stay over the same spot on Earth, which is great for communications. Then you've got MEO satellites, often used for navigation, think UPS. And finally, LEO satellites, like Firefly, orbit much closer to Earth. This lets them capture those really detailed images.
Sounds like understanding the different types of satellite orbits is pretty crucial for UPSC aspirants. Does that kind of thing come up in the exam?
Absolutely. ISRO's role in space technology, the growing commercialization of space, and the implications for international relations are all hot topics you should definitely be familiar with.
Okay, let's move on to our third topic, and this one's about a global issue that's making headlines. Depopulation. A McKinsey report recently came out, and it paints a pretty stark picture of what we're facing.
This report highlights a demographic shift that's happening all over the world. Two-thirds of people now live in countries where birth rates are below replacement level. What that means is populations are shrinking, and that traditional pyramid shape we see with lots of young people at the bottom, it's flipping, starting to look more like an obelisk, narrow at the bottom with more older people at the top.
But a powerful image makes you think about what the consequences could be. What were some of the key takeaways from the McKinsey report?
It warns about some serious economic and social consequences, especially for countries with rapidly aging populations. Fewer young people entering the workforce means fewer taxpayers and consumers, which can slow down economic growth. It also puts pressure on social security and healthcare systems.
This is especially relevant to India, considering our demographic dividend, which we hear so much about. How does this global trend of depopulation affect India's future?
That's a key point. The report talks about something called falling support ratios, meaning the number of working-age people compared to senior citizens is decreasing. In developed countries, they're predicting that retirement systems might need to use a big chunk of workers' income just to cover the expenses of the elderly. And while India still has a pretty young population, our window to benefit from this demographic advantage is getting smaller. We maybe have 3 decades left to leverage this before our support ratios look like those in developed countries. This potential decline in the contribution of the demographic dividend to our economic growth is something we need to address.
So what are some potential solutions or policies that could tackle these challenges and ensure sustainable growth, even with aging and shrinking populations?
Now, that's a question that needs a lot of thought and analysis. It's definitely something we'll explore further.
Right, but before we get into that, we've got a rapid-fire round coming up, packed with a ton of other news you need to know. Get ready. It's going to be a whirlwind tour of current events.
Okay, so let's kick off this rapid-fire round with some news from the Middle East. After 15 long months, a ceasefire agreement has finally been reached between Israel and Hamas.
This conflict's got a long history, something UPSC aspirants should definitely have a grasp on. Can you give us a little bit of the historical context?
Absolutely. The root of it all goes back to the division of Palestinian territory and the creation of Israel after World War II. This led to a bunch of wars between Israel and its Arab neighbors, ultimately culminating in the Yom Kippur War back in '73. That war kind of paved the way for the Camp David Accords in '78, where Egypt became the first Arab nation to officially recognize Israel. Then in '93, you had the Oslo Accord signed between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization. That gave Palestinians some self-governance in Gaza and the West Bank. However, Hamas, the group controlling Gaza, has always been against both the Camp David and Oslo Accords and doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist.
So how did this recent conflict escalate to this point?
It all started with Hamas's Operation Al-Aqsa Storm back in October 2023. A massive attack launched against Israel. Israel retaliated by declaring war on Hamas and launching their own military operations in Gaza. That led to this extended conflict we've seen over the past year.
Hopefully this ceasefire holds and we see a more lasting peace. Let's switch gears now to something that's a big worry all over the world, cybersecurity. The World Economic Forum just put out their Global Cybersecurity Outlook 2025 report, and it's not exactly painting a rosy picture.
It really does highlight how complex and interconnected everything is in the cyber world these days. The report pinpoints a few major factors contributing to this. For one, the vulnerability of global supply chains. We've seen firsthand how software problems and third-party vendors can make cyber attacks spread like wildfire.
It feels like even the smallest weaknesses can have huge consequences in this interconnected world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Then you've got geopolitical tensions spilling over into cyberspace. State-sponsored hackers are increasingly going after critical infrastructure, things like energy grids and telecommunications networks, turning this into a kind of digital arms race.
So where does technology, especially all these advancements in artificial intelligence fit into all of this?
AI, especially this generative AI we hear so much about, it's kind of a double-edged sword. While it can definitely help make cybersecurity defenses stronger, it can also make attackers more powerful. They can use it to create really sophisticated malware, launch social engineering attacks, and even figure out ways to get around traditional security measures.
So basically, staying ahead in cybersecurity is a never-ending battle. What else does the report focus on?
The lack of skilled cybersecurity professionals is a huge concern. Lots of organizations can't find qualified people to protect their systems, leaving them vulnerable. There's also this trend of cybercrime and organized crime teaming up. Cyber-enabled fraud has become so profitable, it's attracting traditional criminal organizations, leading to these massive and really impactful cyber attacks.
It's such a complex and constantly changing landscape. What does the report suggest we do about all this?
It really stresses the need for a fundamental shift in our thinking. Cybersecurity can't be something we think about later or just treat as a tech issue. It needs to be a priority, a strategic investment, a shared responsibility for governments, businesses, and individuals. Building cyber resilience is crucial.
Okay, let's move on to something more positive happening in India. The Startup India initiative just celebrated its 9th anniversary, a whole decade of progress and innovation. What would you say are some of the biggest achievements of this initiative?
This initiative has been so important in creating a vibrant startup ecosystem in India. We've seen the number of DPIIT-recognized startups go through the roof, from just 500 back in 2016 to over 1.59 lakh in 2025. India is now the third largest startup ecosystem in the whole world, with more than 100 unicorns. This growth has created millions of jobs and boosted the economy significantly. It's also great to see that the initiative has really empowered women. A large number of these recognized startups have at least one woman director.
What do you think are the key factors that have led to this amazing success?
There are a few key factors for sure. The Startup India Seed Fund Scheme, SISS, has been instrumental in providing funding at the very beginning for startups so they can develop their ideas. Then there's the Credit Guarantee Scheme for Startups, CGSS, which helps startups get loans more easily. And of course, the Fund of Funds for Startups, FFS, helps them get capital from investors here in India.
It sounds like a multi-pronged approach addressing the different stages of a startup's journey, right?
Exactly. And beyond the funding aspect, the initiative has also made regulations easier, offered tax breaks, and created a supportive policy environment for startups to really flourish.
Now, for some news that could mean warmer relations between India and the U.S., the U.S. recently took 3 Indian entities off its restrictive entity list. What does this move actually mean?
This is a big step that could really breathe life back into the Indo-U.S. Nuclear Cooperation Agreement from 2008. The 3 entities they removed are the Papa Atomic Research Center, BAC, the Indira Gandhi Atomic Research Center, IGCAR, and Indian Rare Earths Limited, IRL. Being on the entity list meant these organizations couldn't get certain U.S. exports, technologies, and services. Taking them off signals a change in the relationship and a potential strengthening of ties, particularly in the area of nuclear energy and technology.
Let's turn to something close to our hearts, culture and philosophy. January 15th was Thiruvalluvar Day, which commemorates the famous Tamil philosopher and poet. Tell us more about him and why he's so important.
Thiruvalluvar is celebrated for his timeless work, the Tirukkural. It's this collection of 1,330 couplets that offer these profound insights into everything from ethics and politics to economics and love. The Tirukkural is divided into 3 sections. Aram, which focuses on righteousness and virtue, Poral, which deals with wealth and material prosperity, and Inbam, which explores love and pleasure. His writings still resonate with people all over the world, emphasizing things like compassion, justice, and living a balanced life.
It's amazing how ancient wisdom can still be so relevant centuries later, isn't it?
It truly is. And speaking of global reach, a Thiruvalluvar Cultural Center is about to open in Singapore, which further highlights the enduring legacy of his work.
Okay, let's shift our focus to the Shikari Devi Wildlife Sanctuary in Himachal Pradesh. The Indian government just designated areas around the sanctuary as eco-sensitive zones, ESSEs. Tell us about this sanctuary and why this decision is significant.
The Shikari Devi Wildlife Sanctuary is this unique and biodiverse region up in the Himalayas. It's home to all sorts of plants and animals. We're talking about the Asiatic black bear, the leopard, the barking deer, and even the giant flying squirrel. The sanctuary is also a designated important bird area by BirdLife International because it's so important for bird conservation. Declaring the surrounding areas as ESS helps create a buffer zone, which means less human impact and better protection for the sanctuary's delicate ecosystem in the long run.
Moving on to news from Africa, the recent African Union Summit adopted a declaration that's all about changing the continent's agricultural sector. What can you tell us about this declaration?
This is called the Kampala Declaration. It's a 10-year plan focused on building resilient and sustainable food systems in Africa. It builds on the Malabo Declaration from 2014 and outlines 6 key commitments they're making.
What are those commitments and how will they actually transform agriculture in Africa?
The declaration focuses on a few key areas: increasing agricultural productivity for better food security, promoting sustainable land and water management to protect those resources, improving nutrition and food safety for healthier people, supporting agricultural research and innovation to drive progress, making it easier for African agricultural products to reach markets and boost economies, and fostering inclusive agricultural development that empowers women and young people.
Sounds like a comprehensive plan, addressing the interconnected challenges of food security, economic development, and making sure we're taking care of the environment.
Exactly. It shows that they're increasingly aware that sustainable agriculture isn't just about feeding people, it's about achieving broader social and economic goals.
Back to space for a minute. SpaceX just launched 2 missions. Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost Mission 1 and ISSpace's Resilience Lunar Lander. What can you tell us about these missions?
Blue Ghost is part of NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services, CLPS, initiative. It's going to deliver 10 scientific instruments to the surface of the moon. These instruments will do various experiments, helping us learn more about the moon and getting us ready for more lunar exploration in the future. Resilience was developed by ISSpace, a Japanese company, and it's a commercial lunar lander that's part of their Hakuto R moon mission 2. It's carrying a micro rover and will test out extracting water from the moon's resources.
So we're seeing a mix of scientific exploration and commercial ventures pushing the boundaries of what we can do on the moon.
Yes, it's really exciting to see. Private companies are playing a bigger and bigger role alongside government agencies in advancing our understanding and use of space.
Let's come back to Earth and talk about health for a minute. India's obesity guidelines have been updated after 15 years. What are some of the major changes?
One big change is that they've replaced the term overweight with obesity grades the CERT and 2. This helps us understand different levels of obesity better and the health risks that come with them. The updated guidelines also acknowledge that just using body mass index, BMI, isn't enough. It doesn't factor in things like body composition or how fat is distributed.
So it seems like these new guidelines are trying to personalize our understanding and management of obesity more.
Absolutely. They emphasize a more comprehensive evaluation. They're looking at individual factors like waist circumference, body composition, and other risk factors to give more tailored advice for managing weight and preventing health problems related to obesity.
Next up, some news highlighting India's technological abilities in an extreme environment. 4G and 5G services have reached the Siachen Glacier, the highest and coldest battlefield in the world.
That's a huge achievement. Setting up and maintaining communications infrastructure in such a tough environment shows just how committed India is to connectivity, even in the most remote and challenging places.
Now for a sad piece of news coming out of the Simlipal Tiger Reserve in Odisha. A melanistic Royal Bengal tiger was poached recently. Can you tell us about these special tigers and what this loss means?
Melanistic Royal Bengal tigers, often called black tigers, have a lot more black pigmentation because of a mutation in their genes. Simlipal is the only place we know of where this rare variation exists. Poaching is a serious threat to tiger populations everywhere, and losing such a rare tiger just highlights how urgent it is that we step up our conservation efforts.
All right, a few more updates and then we'll wrap up this rapid-fire round. First, the Ministry of Defense has launched a new initiative called Farat Run Bhumi Darshan.
This initiative is all about promoting what they call battlefield tourism in India. They've created a website and app that provides information, helps people get clearances, and even offers virtual tours of historic battlefields. We're talking places like Kibithu and Bomla Pass in Arunachal Pradesh, Razangla and Pangonso in Ladakh, even Doklam. It's a really cool way to learn about India's military history and remember the sacrifices of our soldiers.
That sounds pretty fascinating. And the Startup India initiative has added several new programs to provide even more support for the startup ecosystem.
That's right. They've launched platforms like Behaiskar, which connects entrepreneurs with investors and mentors, and MAABI, a platform specifically for mentorship. They've also created a comprehensive digital platform called the Startup India Hub and a state's startup ranking framework to encourage healthy competition between states. These new programs build on what's already there, providing even more support for startups every step of the way.
And finally, an update from the world of space exploration.
SpaceX has launched 2 more missions, Blue Ghost and Resilience. Just like the missions we talked about earlier, these continue to push the limits of what we can do on the moon. It shows how private companies are playing a bigger and bigger role in this exciting field.
That does it for our rapid-fire round. It was a whirlwind, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. But that's what it's like keeping up with current affairs, especially for dedicated UPSC aspirants like you guys. It's all about constantly learning new things and finding the connections between events that seem totally unrelated.
And we're here to help you through it all, giving you the insights and analysis you need to succeed.
Before we move on, let me ask you something. What stood out to you most from everything we talked about today? What piqued your interest?
It's a great question to think about. We've covered a lot, but each topic is like a thread in a larger tapestry. Together, they create this complex and fascinating picture of the world we live in. And it's so important not to just passively listen, but to really engage with all of this. Think critically, ask questions, and look for those connections. Like, how do you think India's growing naval power might actually affect its role in space exploration, or its ability to handle those depopulation challenges we were talking about? They might seem totally separate, but often there are links you might not expect.
That's a great point. Think about how a strong navy can protect those sea routes that are crucial for moving all the stuff and people involved in space exploration. And those advancements in shipbuilding, like what we saw with the INS Botschaer, that technology can have an impact on other industries too, maybe even leading to innovations that can help us address those demographic challenges.
It's about seeing the big picture, right? Recognizing patterns and understanding how everything is connected. These are essential skills if you want to ace the UPSC exam.
Absolutely. It's not just about memorizing facts. It's about analyzing, synthesizing, and forming well-rounded opinions.
Well said. And with that, we've come to the end of another episode. We covered so much today, from naval power and hyperspectral imaging to depopulation and cybersecurity. I hope you found it insightful and engaging.
I did too. And remember, every single bit of knowledge you gain gets you one step closer to achieving your UPSC goals.
And if something really piqued your interest today, go deeper, do your research, and share what you find in the comments. We love hearing from you.
Absolutely. When you actively participate, it makes the learning experience so much richer for everyone.
Before we go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tell your friends about this episode, especially those fellow UPSC aspirants. Come back tomorrow for another deep dive into current affairs. Happy learning.
And don't forget to like this episode and leave a comment. Your support helps us reach more learners just like you. See you tomorrow.